Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode. Fantastic to have a wonderful guest joining me here from way on the other side of the world. Patrick, welcome to the program.
Anthony, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I'm really fascinated by what we're going to discuss here today because you've got a book out. If I can do it, you can do it. And I think in order to unpack that and to unpack the true value that we can deliver to the audience today, I think we need to let you tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I appreciate it. So, born and raised in Buffalo, New York. So anybody who's in the U.S. knows that's or is familiar with Buffalo knows it's a very cold place. I was born completely blind, so other than some light perception that I have, but not enough to use for mobility, to drive, to write, to read and write using sight or anything like that. My story, other than the obstacles I had as a child, was pretty normal. Went to public school, then went to college for radio broadcasting. Thought I was going to be a sports either color commentator or more than likely pregame, postgame. That's what I was looking to do for American football, things like that. But after that, I got into sales the same way that most people end up in sales, which is falling feet first into it. Had never sold anything, but got into the insurance industry because I was doing some call center work for a couple of months and I really didn't like it. So collections work. So I got into outside insurance sales. That's if you grow up in Buffalo, New York, Bills and Sabres, Bills football, Sabres hockey are a way of life. It's not just something you do for fun. And so my equalizer was radio because I couldn't watch what was going on in the game. And a lot of times, no offense to anybody who's a TV announcer, but a lot of times they don't have to be as descriptive of what's going on because, well, people can see it, except me and a handful of perhaps other people. But for me, in order to kind of have that equalizer, radio was that for me. And thankfully we had some of the, I would say, argue, and I'm biased, but some of the best radio announcers out there for both teams. And Van Miller, who was the Bills play-by-play guy for, I don't know, 35 years, something like that, 35 years. And then Rick Jenneret, who's a legend, who unfortunately neither one's still alive. But I grew up on that. And so that was, I think, I know that's where my passion for sports radio was born. And that's something that I took through college. I got to work in radio for 4 years while I was in college and I loved it. But that's probably why I love doing these podcast interviews. One, I get to talk about the things I love talking about, but number two, I feel like I'm back on the radio.
It's one of the great things about radio, and I think people forget that as well. And it's someone, who is visually impaired, obviously understands this more, is that radio and podcasting for that matter is about painting pictures with words.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how different the medium is from the visual medium of TV. And
Yep.
people forget that so hugely. And I think creating that, and I imagine that is a really interesting idea for someone who's not seeing things, because I can obviously imagine a football field because I've seen a football field, so it's not difficult for me to imagine. So
Yep.
how do you get that imagery, from a young age? That must have been was it a difficult thing, or was it something that just came easily and naturally because you never had the opportunity to see it?
Yeah, I think it's more of the second. I think your brain, it's amazing how the brain works. As you know, the brain thinks in pictures regardless of if you can see the pictures or not. So if it doesn't know what something looks like, it'll just it'll fill in the blanks where it can, and take the description that it has and create a picture. My version of red, as I always say, might not be the same as someone else's, but if you say red, I still have something I can picture, which is, I think, really hard because that's the question I get from sighted people the most. If they dig into, once they realize I'm an open book about my blindness, they'll start to ask questions about, like, well, how do you envision color? So there's just a couple of stories there that I use to explain it, but that your brain will fill in those gaps to the extent that it can. But like, I always say, if someone says picture a red door or talk about a red door, my brain doesn't picture the words, red door in Braille in my head. It actually, pictures a door with a handle that is what I would think of as red. So in terms of the football field, the hockey rink, some of that is, I've had diagrams or models built for me, with things I really cared about, like with sports, using things like puffy paint or 3D three-dimensional models where you can tell, hey, here's where the blue line is, here's the red line for hockey, and no one got a good idea of what that looks like, and same for a football field. But you're right that your brain does have to fill in some of those pictures, and when you have a really good announcer, a play-by-play announcer, or a color commentator, it makes all the difference because they fill in a lot of those gaps and they paint that picture with words, as you mentioned, for the brain for you to then have a real life experience and feel like you're there as opposed to just somebody talking about what they ate for lunch or whatever while the game's going on.
I think the fascinating thing about all of that is that by the power of painting pictures with words is that
Mm.
you have the ability to control how people engage emotionally with whatever it is that you're talking to. Whereas when you have the visual medium, and I've worked in news in both TV and radio, and the difference is quite staggering.
Yes.
Obvious, but staggering, because in TV, you can only talk to whatever the pictures will support.
Yep.
So if you want to talk about something and there are no pictures, you can't really talk about it because people are expecting things to be visual. Whereas
Yep.
in radio, you have the ability for much more immediacy, and you also have the ability to talk to things and describe them in the way you've interpreted them and the way you want people to see them, which may not be exactly as whatever the camera may allow. And I
Yep.
think that's a fascinating thing to be brought up on in your case, because that's going to be the most powerful thing. And it is an emotional engagement tool.
Absolutely. And as I say to my coaching members all the time, the two of the most important skills you're ever going to master, and hopefully you will in life, and that's how you communicate with the written word and how you communicate verbally. Those two things are your tools to paint pictures for people, whether you're selling, whether you're talking, marketing a product, whatever it is that you're doing, or even if it's that you're out, you're an influencer on social media. Yes, putting up pictures worth 1,000 words. We've all heard the cliche, but it's also true. Not sure it's exactly 1,000, but it's worth more than just that picture. There's a lot there to unpack because it's a visual, and the brain immediately, will pick up things from that picture and draw conclusions. But if you can communicate with verbally and with the written word and paint pictures for people, create imagery, that's going to help people move to action or to move them in the direction that you want to. Hopefully, that's a good thing in terms of where you're moving them. Hopefully, you're doing that for the good of humanity and to make a positive impact. But it's amazing what you can do. Like if you hear people who, whether they're in politics or they're sales professionals or they're entrepreneurs, the most effective people are really able, either they or they have someone on their team who's really good at articulating through the written word or through verbal communication, the, as you just said, the ability to transfer words into visual imagery that gets people to have an emotional connection with what's being said. If you can't do that, we're just talking about white papers or whatever. People are not going to buy what you're selling, whether that's, you know, investing capital in it or if it's voting for you as a candidate. It's not going to happen.
Absolutely. So I want to unpack a little bit more about who you are and what you do, because I had an interesting discussion. I'm going to preface it with this. For people listening in, I hope you're going to nod your heads in agreement with this. A lot of people balk at the idea of seeing themselves as an expert. They think that experts are reserved for, I don't know, some people that have done several degrees and masters and this and that and all that sort of stuff and have got, 40 years experience before they can call themselves an expert. Yet I believe having an expertise in an area is really about um, having a set of stories and insights as a result of those stories and experiences. And so the reason I say this to you is because you have this great book, If I Can Do It, You Can Do It. And it's based on you having particular set of experiences that you've had in your life that takes and can give those insights to other people. I think it's a great demonstration of the fact that you have your own version of things. Are you necessarily the number one expert in a particular area? No, but doesn't stop you from being an expert and giving value to people.
I love what you just said there because it's so true. Most people will have imposter syndrome, and don't get me wrong, I have it at times. So that never goes away 100%. But you get very quickly to a point where you say, well, I may know a little bit about this, but I'm not an expert. Well, I'll just pick something that I know nothing about. But let's say you've been doing yoga for 3 years, and you've taken a number of classes on it. You've taught a class, or maybe you've taught a class or two. Maybe you've done an instruction for a group at a local business, but you haven't done a lot of instruction on it, and you've read 2 or 3 books on the topic. Let's face it, compared to the majority of people you're going to meet, you're an expert on yoga, because majority of people haven't done that. They haven't read 3 books on the topic. They haven't taught a class on it, even if it was just, hey, 5-week class and there's 8 people in the class or 5 people in the class. And they haven't done it for 3 years. So you know more than probably, and I'm just throwing a number out, 90, maybe even 95%, but 90% of the population on that. That makes you to some extent an expert. It does. If you've written a book on a topic because you know enough about it and you've had enough real life experience related to that, that you can put that into a book, that makes you an authority or an expert on that topic. As you just mentioned, does that mean you know more than everybody else? No, but you're not claiming to do that. And that's one of the things that, that in sales and leadership, and motivational speaking, that I really feel like is amazing to me. I mean, my book I wrote to make an impact on people, and really get people out of their comfort zone and feel like, hey, I have challenges in my life. And maybe for a lot of people, there probably a lot of people read my book have bigger challenges than I do, but it's just mine is very obvious. When I walk in a room with a guide dog or a white mobility cane, people are like, oh, he's blind. Like, it's just very obvious. So people perceive that to be, hey, he's had a ton of challenges without knowing anything about me. We haven't even shaken hands yet. I just walked in the room. They already perceive that, hey, I've been through a lot of challenges, which of course they're right. I'm human. We all have. One thing I know about everybody, one thing I know about you, Anthony, we've only been talking a few minutes. I know you've had challenges because that's part of, and I know you have kids, so you definitely have had some. So, because that's just part of being a parent, it's part of being a human being, it's part of being married, it's part of life. But I kind of wear that when I walk in because of the fact that my challenges, or at least the perceived challenges I've had, are very visible. And people jump to that conclusion, which I think works to my advantage, because then people open my book if and when they do that and they go, well, he's right. I mean, if he can do whatever he's done, I can do whatever I'm looking to do. And as they read through the book, I try my very best to build on that narrative because I believe that it can help people. That being said, the book, it really made a lot of people. I've noticed that you can tell people, hey, I have 15 years in sales of sales experience, and I have 10 years of sales training experience, and I've trained people at different corporations, and I've worked one-on-one with sales agents and helped people go from not being able to close a window to being able to close at the top of their industry or of their class. And you can say all that, Anthony, but if you write a book, they like, oh, you wrote a book, you're an expert, you're an authority. And I'm like, I had all the knowledge before I wrote the book, but once you write the book, it's in a package now, and everyone just seems to go, okay, then you know what you're talking about. So it's interesting when you say, I thought of that right away when you brought up being an expert or an authority. You want to be a perceived expert, and I encourage you to actually be one before you do this. But you probably are an expert in some area, if not more than one area of your life, your business, as a parent, whatever it is. You want to package that up. One of the quickest ways to have other people be like, wow, you're an expert at this, write a book. It's the silliest thing sometimes, but it's absolutely true. It's a great point. And that's really all mentorship is you've been to, whether it's helping someone pick out or buy a diamond ring, or it's, hey, I've been in business for 15 years, you've been in for 15 days. Or they come to you and say, hey, I've been in for 15 days, you've been doing this 15 years, you've had, a decent amount of success. You've been in sales a lot longer than me, and you're a very good closer. Share with me what it is that you're doing. Can I take you out for coffee? Can I hire you as a coach? Whatever it is. That's all mentorship is. And it's amazing to me, blows my mind how often people are in a new industry and I'm like, who's your mentor? They've been doing this for 6 months or a year. I don't have a mentor. What do you mean you don't have a mentor? You don't have someone who's coaching you, who's further up the road than you are, the road that you're looking to travel, to go to them and say, hey, here's where I am. You were at this point at one point. How did you get from here to there? How can I bump into fewer obstacles and get fewer bruises on my shins or my forehead, depending on the height of the obstacle, the proverbial obstacle? How do I get fewer bumps and bruises than you did, right? How do I avoid those obstacles? I mean, that's, to me, there is no secret to success. Everyone wants a secret or a shortcut. But other than being able to command attention, right, which is that, elusive superpower out there, but outside of that, I'd say the closest thing to a shortcut to success is finding someone who's a mile up the road that you want to travel, as you just said, or has 5 or 10 minutes more knowledge, perhaps in some cases, because it's like, hey, I'm looking to buy a diamond. You at least did some research on this. Somebody probably walked you through this. What should I do? Like, what do I got? What do I have to do? But that's all really mentorship is just allowing someone who knows more than you do. I mean, obviously interview the person a little bit first, make sure that they actually do. But if it's someone you know and someone you trust, give them your hand and let them guide you up that path. And if they have that knowledge that can get you to where you want to go, then the investment doesn't really matter. If it's a cup of coffee, great. If it's a burger, great. If it's a steak, great. If it's X number of dollars a month or a year, great. If you know that their information can get you where you need to go faster with less effort, then the investment really doesn't matter, right? Find the money, find the resources, whatever it is. Find a way to get to them to find time. If they can't talk because they're in Australia and you're in the United States or somewhere else in the world, and it's like, I got to get up at 1 a.m. to have the conversation. Whatever you have to do that, because it will save you tremendous amounts of time, energy, money, and stress. And that's what we're all looking to do.
Absolutely. And I think it also talks to the idea that just because you can doesn't mean you should when it comes to a lot of areas, because I think that's the other thing too that a mentor and a coach does is guide you on what you should actually be doing and what you should be outsourcing or finding some other resources to be able to do it for you. Because too often I think we fall into this bracket of, well, we should be able to do all of these things ourselves, but should you is the big question. And you need someone to guide you on that.
Trial and error is the most expensive way to learn anything. So sometimes it has to happen because there's just no other way to do it. You're a trailblazer in your industry and no one's ever done it before. Or, like I literally I don't have any resources. So for the first short period of time, I need to do trial and error until I learn from some of my own mistakes and then have the resources to hire somebody. But if you don't have to learn by trial and error, learn a different way. Yes, you should still take action, of course, and some trial and error will be a part of it. But if that's the main way you're learning, you need to bring a coach or a mentor on in your field, or in business or sales or leadership, whatever it is that you're doing, because that's that's going to make a difference. People ask me a lot, if you could change one thing, or if you could do one thing different early on in your business and sales career? I would have hired a coach sooner, and I would have invested in my business sooner than I did, because I was that person just like everybody else. Like, oh, I can't afford, which is really bad mentality to have. I had to get rid of that and cancel that out. But early on, it was, I don't have the money to hire a coach. I don't have the money to be able to hire an appointment setter. I don't have the money to be able to join a networking group. But, once I shook that mentality and started doing those things, business started growing exponentially for me. And I realized that, hey, the more time that I can free up by doing things better, the more that I could free up time to do the things that I should be working on instead of doing everything, right? Doing 20 different things in my business instead of the 2 or 3 I was really good at. So I think that's the biggest thing that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Now, I want to come and delve into some of the speaking and the sales and the coaching that you do. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to come back to the book, I think, for as a starting point. I should have asked you this before we came on air, but I'm going to put you on the spot as well. The book, which we'll provide links for in the show notes. Have you got an audiobook version of it?
I do not yet. I've had a number of people ask me about that, so that is something that will be coming out, but I do not have one right now. No.
Well, definitely need to make that happen. I love
Great.
I love listening to audiobooks for all of the reasons we spoke about before, and I do a bit of time in the car, so being able to listen to something is fantastic. Lots of extra value in that. So, but I want to come back to the title of the book. If I can do it, you can do it. I mean, the obvious thing is to say that it's about you overcoming the obstacle of your of your sight, but is that really, is there more to it than that? Because is that, did you always see that as a big challenge because you weren't born with sight? So was it the challenge in the same way that other people who might have experienced it and then lost it might have?
Great point. And a lot of people don't recognize that. That yes, I would say that at times I saw it as a challenge. When I was in high school and I, didn't have a ton of friends, I was getting picked on at times. Nothing crazy like getting beat up or anything, but just it just wasn't a great time in my life, and I probably blamed my blindness for a lot more of that than I should have, and it probably was a factor. But overall, as a young child, I didn't look at it as adversity or challenges. I mean, it's just part of who I am. And I got through that period of time where everybody needs to fit in and everyone needs to be swimming downstream in the same direction, otherwise you're weird. And I wasn't someone who easily fit in. Now I'm proud of that now, and I'm happy that's the case. And I like swimming upstream when everyone else is swimming downstream because, usually that means there's more opportunity where I'm headed. I don't like to always be going the same way as the majority, but at the time as a teenager, it's not something that you look at as a positive. When you become an entrepreneur, then you're like, okay, it's normal for me to be swimming the other way. But and it was a good muscle for me to have to build. But early on as a child, no, I didn't look at it, when I was younger as an adversity or challenges. But everything that I did, Anthony, I didn't think of it this way at the time, but looking back on it was preparing me. God was working to prepare me for coaching, right? And mentorship and, being able to speak, but especially for coaching because I didn't, putting the toothpaste on my toothbrush, brushing my teeth without being able to see it. How do most sighted children learn how to do that? By watching someone else put the toothpaste on the toothbrush, right? Tying your shoes. Yeah, you have to do it yourself, but you do it by modeling, someone else modeling it for you and then following what they're doing, right? Same thing's true for cutting your food, for pouring liquid in a glass without spilling it, learning how to drink out of a glass instead of a sippy cup. Yeah, I didn't think about any of this when I was 3 or 2, whatever. But I had to find creative ways to solve problems from a very young age that were very simple problems for most children. But for me, they required some outside the box thinking early on in life. And so by the time I was, a teenager and then eventually in my 20s, and then as I started my career, I was equipped with this ability to think outside the box that was really built over 20 years from the time I was a toddler on. I never realized it until later, but now when I'm coaching, people are like, how do you come up with these ideas? And I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, I've learned a lot from really great mentors who I've been blessed to work with, coaches. I've read a ton of books. I've gone to a ton of seminars. I've done a lot of trial and error, and I've experienced a lot in the sales and the entrepreneur world in terms of leadership positions and things like that. But one of the biggest things that I think where that started was just the mindset that was built from early on in life. I always say that, one of the things I teach my 3-year-old to say all the time is I do hard things. And I think that's what happened to me early on was I was okay with doing hard things because I had to be. And I didn't think of them as hard things at the time, but it builds calluses, if you will, on your character. And that is something that over time builds more character. I'm always working on that. I'm a work in progress. I'm the character, we all are, but I think that it builds character when you've been through adversity. So that's really kind of the book in a nutshell. Is it's not just about my blindness. That's there, obviously that story is embedded in the book, but it all basically is that I've overcome challenges over and over in sales, in business, in leadership, and then in life. And then how I try my goal with the book, and something that people always say that they like about the book, is they're like, the book, I felt like when I was reading the book, it was speaking directly to me. Well, how could that be possible? I'm a blind dude who wrote the book about, overcoming challenges. But what I did in the book, or at least attempted to, and apparently from most people's perspective, fairly successfully, I attempted to tie that into, if you're in this role, how can you think outside the box this way? How can you apply this to what you're going through right now? So the goal is for the book to be an action guide for someone to say, okay, there's a story, this person overcame adversity, but he gives real life examples that I can then take and apply, and real life blueprints on how to deal with the challenges that I have in my life, business, career, whatever, relationships, whatever it is. So that really is the goal of the book, is yes, to be entertaining and interesting, and kind of a feel good book that, hey, if this guy can do it, I can do it. But it's also meant to be practical, which I think is, if it's not that, then the rest, it's just a cool story and it didn't do anything for you. My goal is for you to be able to take it, the 20 tips in the book, and apply them right away in your own life.
Such an important thing as well is you're right, because like you, I've been to plenty of talks, I've listened to plenty of books, I've read plenty of books, I've had plenty of conversations with people, and often it's about how much seeps in and how much you actually enact as a result of it. Because too often, yeah, cool idea, but it's forgotten straight away. So you have to find ways to engage people so they actually take action, which is, I gather, where you comes in and take to that next step on, take some coaching from you as well. So typically, what's that like for you getting to? How much is it for you getting to understand someone's business and being able to mentor or coach them in a particular way versus how much is you just giving over what your knowledge is and them applying it to their particular situation?
Yeah, it's a little bit of learning about your business, but not a lot. I mean, I'll give you an example. I have someone who owns a plumbing company I'm working with right now, and someone who owns a landscaping company. I don't know anything about either one of those things. I know more than I did in the case of the landscaping 2 years ago. We started working together, and I started coaching him. But we've revamped a tremendous amount of his landscaping business. Not his credit; he implemented and did the work, but his business looks nothing like it did 2 years ago, and it's not because I learned how to cut grass, and in the case of this person who's, up north, how to plow snow. Yeah, I didn't learn how to do either one of those things, and if you ask me to do those, forget it. So, I needed to know a little bit about the equipment that the business has and how that works, and but the biggest part is business is still business, and he's not asking me to learn. He didn't hire me because he wanted to be a better landscaper. He's already a good landscaper. He hired me because he wants to be better at running his business in a way that builds more of a 10x mindset than a 2x. I'm a big fan of Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy's work. 10x is easier than 2x. Building exponentially rather than incrementally, and quality over quantity. Most people just try and go get more quantity with their business, and that's what this gentleman is a good friend of mine now. What was trying to do, and I don't blame him because no one had ever told him there was another way. So a lot of it is adding in the strategy of, there is a better way to do this. What you're doing, you're great at what you do. Now, can we make you even more effective by maybe changing how we're running the business? In other words, maybe, taking on more commercial accounts rather than just residential. Or, hey, you have in this person's case, you have a ton of residential accounts, but only a handful of commercial, but you have all the equipment for the commercial. You're actually better set up to do that than a lot of people in the area. And you do really good work. Let's start focusing more on the commercial. Now you don't have to drop a ramp on your truck as many times. That takes up a lot of the travel time. you're able to, there's bigger investment people are going to make in landscaping commercially than they are in residential. And so we make you more efficient and effective. And so that, those are the types of things that I help people with, versus someone who, someone who's in as a sales manager. Am I going to, obviously that industry, I know a lot about it. I might not know about what they sell, the product or service, but I know a decent, quite a bit about sales, how to close, how to follow up, how to overcome objections, how to get more referrals. Those are things I'm good at. But I don't need to know every single thing about their process, but I need to know at least the basics. And then we start getting into overall big picture strategy on how do we go from where we are to where we want to go. A lot of times we have to drop some things that we're doing because we're trying to be good at everything. You and I kind of talked about this before we went live, or jumped on the recording. But I like to, from my perspective, I want you to be really, really good at one or two things. If you're in business or sales, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're in a leadership role, and then delegate, automate, or eliminate the rest, right? So that someone else is taking care of those pieces of the puzzle that are better at it. Or in some cases, we probably shouldn't be doing this. It's an add-on that really isn't making a lot of money, that isn't profitable, or even if it is profitable, it's taking 2 or 3 times as much time as what we could have been doing. So if we were to take that and reinvest it back into what I call your core genius, which is the 10 or 20% of your business that you're investing your time in, you're probably investing 20% of your time in that when it should be 80% of your time, right? Or 70% of your time. If we could get you focused mostly on what you're really good at and what you excel at, and what powers the engine of your business, that's what we should be focused on. So that's really, I would say, the biggest thing. So yes, I need to know a little bit about your business, but it's far more important that we look at the big picture than how you cut grass or whatever it is that you do in your day to day.
And it's interesting that you say that, because all of those things are absolutely true about what I do as well in terms of podcasting, because my goal is to bring out the expertise of the people that I'm talking to, because it's about them
Yep.
and sharing their stories and insights with the audience so they can focus on that genius and let everything else take care of itself, and show them how that can be done. And I think that's an important lesson for people that are listening in, is to focus on that 80% of, because if you're not, then inevitably things fall over and don't work as they should. Because if you get trapped and it's reversed around, and so 80% of your time is spent on doing the things that you don't really love and don't bring you joy, and are not the things that you really got into the business for in the first place, then it's going to struggle as a result.
Absolutely. And I have a client, makes me think of my client, Dan, who I'm working with right now. Very good on serial entrepreneur, really good in the, he works in the merchant services and credit card processing space, and has a very successful business. But one of the things we're working on is, really looking at who is the ideal client, right? And he's working with a lot of clients that will come to him because, he has a great reputation in his area locally where he is, in his local area. So people come to him, they want to work with him, but they're not the ideal client. And a lot of people struggle with this, myself included, years ago, where it's like you just want to work with anybody who's willing to come to you. Like, hey, can you do this? Well, yeah, I can do it. Now, can you? Yes, but are they the ideal client just because you can actually bring them on as a client? And the answer is in many cases, probably not. They're not your ideal client. So are you going after that ideal client, ideal customer avatar, that ICA as I call it, or are you not, right? Are you going after uh, anybody because it's like, hey, we need to pay our bills and keep the doors open. And this person's at this point where he doesn't need to, it's not about paying the bills and keeping the doors open. Like, obviously you have to always do that. But he's at a point where he's looking to grow exponentially. And like, you're not going to do that by taking on these clients who are taking up a tremendous amount of your time and your resources and your staff's resources, which is the most valuable resource and asset is our time. But that's keeping you from bringing on these high level clients who you can give that white glove service to, who can refer you to other high level clients, and that you actually want to work with. And most of the time, you and I both know it, that higher ticket client is usually far less of a pain or needs babysitting, because they're not new to the industry. They're cranking out a good amount of of cash flow and income and profitability in their business. And therefore they just want you to be the expert when things break bad and to take care of things and keep the trains running on time. That's the client you want to work with. Most people are chasing or at least inviting or taking on the client that's low hanging fruit, which may be good in some cases, but in many cases it's not. It's not the person you're ideally looking for. And they're afraid to raise their standards, and I get it because I was that person. I know it can be scary. Afraid to raise their standards because they're like, I'm turning business away. That's not good. Like I could go out of business because I'm turning business away. Obviously, you got to be able to keep the lights on, but once we get past that and we can get our head above water, the goal should be to grow by bringing on the right people and having the right model and building exponentially and focusing on quality over quantity. And if you can get past the fear to do that, that's where most entrepreneurs really hit the skylight and go right on through it.
Tell you what, we could talk about this for hours and hours, and we may do another session another time, but I want to, there's a couple of questions that I just want to ask you to finish things up. And one is that, because I know you do a lot of sales training as well as the coaching space, and that kind of intermingles, and there's a degree of, and I find it fascinating, even you describe yourself on your website as sales trainer and motivational speaker. So how much is motivation, which is kind of in a sense what the book and the title is, you know, if I can do it, you can do it. So there's a motivation factor there. And how much is actually training? Because there are obstacles for people to overcome, because I don't think I'm going to be any good at sales. I don't really want to do sales. And then there's the actual practicalities of how they do it.
It's a combination of both. I would say it has to start. I'm glad you asked this question because most of the coaching clients I work with, we're not talking necessarily sales training, but even in that as well in the beginning. But if someone's, let's say, a coaching client, that coaching member, they first they find me, they go to talkwithpatrick.com, they book a strategy session. We sit down, we go over what their vision is, where I can help them. Are they a fit? Am I a fit for them? And most of the time, once they come on board as a client, they think that they're going to, the first thing we're going to do is start working on tactics and strategies. And we'll get there. And that has to be part of it, right? It has to be implementable, but it's something that's you can implement. But the biggest thing we usually start with is the mindset side, which sounds kind of, hocus pocus, but I'm telling you that it's a lot of times people have things, as you just mentioned, emotionally, psychologically, and I'm not a therapist and don't claim to be, but they have some shifts that they need to make in their mindset, right? They're not, telling someone that they can build a business exponentially by talking, we'll just use that as an example because we just talked about it, focusing on quality instead of quantity. They'll be like, yeah, I get that in theory, but I just can't wrap my mind around it. So we really have to get to unpacking that and then getting them to shift their mindset before we can implement strategy. Because I could give them strategy all day long that's effective, but if they're not going to implement it because they don't believe it's possible, the rest isn't going to matter. So really the mindset comes simultaneously with the strategy, but a lot of times it is the first step. Even if we're doing strategy at the same time, the mindset has to be there. It's like the foundation. Everybody wants to put the roof on and put the windows in and the shutters and everything else that goes on the house that looks nice. It's like, oh, this is the cute stuff. This is the fun stuff. Let's get right into the strategy. And it's like the foundation isn't there. The rest of this isn't going to matter. So we don't want to be building a house on the sand. We want to be building it on rock. We want to be building it on a strong foundation. If you can do that with your mindset, then the strategy is actually going to be, as we put that muscle on the skeleton, is actually going to be effective. But I'm a big believer in as well in really helping the brain see how something's possible, because we can talk all the time about woo woo and just think positively, and look, there's some truth to you want to have more of a positive mindset than negative, of course, but if that's all it is, that's all fluff or nutter, it's not going to matter. At the end of the day, what you really want is to be able to teach the brain and show the brain this is possible. Start with emotion, but then back that emotion up with logic by showing numbers that, hey, if we bring this number, X number of units, and we go from a unit being worth 10,000 instead of 2,000 each, Now we need far fewer units. Now we're talking about building with quality, not with quantity. And then that person goes, oh, yeah, we would only have to bring on 20 units as opposed to 200 or as opposed to 100 units in terms of new customers or new sales, whatever that is. And then the brain starts to go, oh, this is possible. So it's a combination of both. I'm so glad you asked that, because a lot of times people think it's just strategy or it's just mindset. Most of the time, just strategy, but it has to be a combination of both.
Now, Patrick, one additional question I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to put it in the other podcast,
Okay.
if you don't mind, which is just to wrap things up. I want to ask you about the importance of people being out there. You know, you talk to a lot of businesses in coaching and mentoring and motivational speaking and all of those things that you're doing and encouraging them. But how many people are too shy to put themselves out there as an expert? And what do you say to that in terms of overcoming that and the need to do that in order to help their business grow?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say the biggest thing that holds most people back is inaction, right? It sounds so obvious, but yet most people, that's what they're struggling with. I would rather see somebody who messes up all the time, takes action, and then realizes they're going in the wrong direction and can correct course and go the other way, than someone who, most of the time when I'm working with someone, as a coach, they may be really successful in their business in some way, but there's still that, hey, in this one area, I know I probably should be doing this, and we may need to make some tweaks to that, but they're still hesitant to take action. And I get it. It's risk. Nobody's really excited to hit adversity or be like, hey, I messed this up. Everybody overthinks at times, but most of the time people need to stop planning and start doing. That doesn't mean when I say that, some people may think don't have a plan. That's not what I mean. But I mean, most people are spend days, weeks, months, years fine tuning their plan, when in reality what they need to be doing is taking action. Or as you said on the expert front on this question, which is a really good one. Most people think, oh, I need to get this certification, or I need to learn more in this area before I'm an expert. Chances are you're already an expert in some area. You might want to fine tune that a little bit, but don't spend 2 years doing something, or a year doing something that really is only going to make an incremental difference in terms of someone's perception of you being an expert. Like most people who are listening right now, if they had somebody write the book for them, which they certainly could, they don't have to. I mean, today's world, you don't have to do it yourself, but most of them have the information to write a book on something. And books are still in the AI world, the social media world, the world we live in where everything is digital. There is still something about holding a tangible book in your hand. Yes, audiobooks as well. Big fan myself, obviously, but holding a tangible book in your hand and someone going, wow, you're an expert in this area, creating a course, whatever it is, packaging up your knowledge of what you have and actually implementing that, like actually getting it out there to people. Don't worry so much about perfection. If you're, if I always say, if your first baby isn't, in terms of the business world or getting something out there as an entrepreneur, if your first baby isn't ugly, you probably waited way too long, right? If your first project that you're getting out there, your first product or service, when you launch it, if there aren't corrections that need to be made, you probably held on way too long, and that means you didn't get it out there. As my business coach, James Malinchak, and some of you may know him from the hit TV show Secret Millionaires, he always says, my ugly book is better than the one you don't have. And I love that because it's funny, but it's also true in that if you waited 5 years to write the book, nope, it's not making an impact on anybody. And I got mine out in 6 months. And the one that is out there is actually making an impact. People are actually buying it. Can you fine tune it? Yeah. Can you put out another edition? Sure. Can you write a second book that's better than the first? Of course. Can you launch a second course or add on to the first one and put a revised version out? Of course. But most people wait until things are what they perceive as perfect, which, by the way, it never is anyway. And if you're working on perfecting it, it's never going to be perfect. So doing something, yes, you want it to be quality, but doing something and taking action and getting it out there versus holding on and waiting too long is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to you. Chances are you're already better than you think. Yes, put your best foot forward and do the best that you can, but don't over tweak things to the point where it's like, hey, we're worried about moving commas around, or you said in this one sentence and you got to perfectly snip everything out of the course that you want, or you've got to give 100 talks, but for free before you go out there and ask someone to pay you for it. Like, no, you've got to get yourself out there and really put yourself out there in front of the public if you want to succeed. Because I can assure you, nobody who's had tremendous success in anything they're doing, sat around for 10 years and didn't do anything and just planned and planned and planned. They got something out. Someone said, hey, that's stupid, that's ugly, that didn't work out right. And most of the time they failed the first time or didn't have the success they thought they would. And they worked on it again and did it again. And what if, Edison said, you know what, I'm not going to try to do the light bulb because I'm not ready yet. And he didn't fail, whatever it was, 999 times, and learn 1,000 ways or 500 ways, whatever it was, to not build the light bulb until he got it right. Like, we probably wouldn't have electricity, or if we did, it would be from somebody else. But he just kept putting it out there, putting it out there, putting it out there. Just keep taking action. Yes, it should be calculated action, but keep taking action, because eventually you're going to hit, as opposed to the person who's waiting for the perfect shot. Your chances of that working out the first time are low, and then your chances of missing are very high. Where if you just keep taking calculated shots, you're eventually going to hit your target.
That it applies to the books, it applies to podcasting, it definitely applies to everyone listening in the audience. Thank you again so much for being part of the program. We will include all the details on how to get in touch with you in the show notes. Really appreciate all of your time.
Love it. Thanks so much.